000. That timestamp appeared on mission logs from Carrier Air Wing, 15 more nights than anyone cared to count during the 1967 monsoon season over North Vietnam. The A-6 Intruder flew more bombing sorties in zero visibility conditions than every other Navy strike aircraft combined. The next nearest platform managed roughly a third of the Intruder's all-weather sortie count in Route Package 6, the most heavily defended airspace on Earth at the time. The airframe looked like nothing that belonged on a carrier deck. Stubby wings, a bulbous nose, 2 seats side by side instead of tandem, wingtip speed brakes that split open like clamshells. Grumman's own engineers called it the tadpole during early development. The fleet called it worse, but the A-6 carried the Diane system, Digital Integrated Attack Navigation Equipment, a name that sounded futuristic in 1960 and stayed futuristic for another 2 decades. While F-4 Phantom crews needed a visual horizon or a radar beacon to put bombs near a target, an Intruder bombardier navigator could slave his attack radar to a ballistic computer and release 18,000 pounds of ordnance through cloud, rain, fog, and darkness with a circular error probable under 40 feet. Commander Charlie Hunter, who led VA-85 aboard the USS Kitty Hawk, put it simply in a post-deployment brief: "We own the night. Nobody else even rented it." If that number surprises you, 40 feet, in weather that grounded everything else on the flight deck, drop a comment with what you thought the A-6 could actually do. Subscribe if carrier aviation matters to you, and stay through the end. The monsoon story gets stranger. North Vietnamese air defense commanders tracked the pattern quickly. Clear skies brought swarms of American jets. Overcast brought silence. Then, sometime in late 1966, overcast stopped bringing silence. A single aircraft type kept coming, alone, below the clouds, hitting bridges and supply depots that radar-guided anti-aircraft crews couldn't even see. Gunners had no visual solution, SAM operators had no warning, and the strange ugly jet with the side-by-side cockpit never missed. 8 companies submitted proposals. The Navy threw out 7 of them before Christmas 1957. The requirement read like science fiction: a carrier-based attack aircraft that could find and destroy a moving target at night, in weather, without ground-based navigation aids, at ranges exceeding 1,000 nautical miles. Every major airframe manufacturer in America took a crack at it. Douglas, North American, Boeing, Vought, all gone in the first cut. Grumman survived because Grumman cheated the problem. Every other competitor designed an airplane first, then tried to bolt an avionics suite onto it. Grumman's team at Bethpage, Long Island, did it backward. They started with the Diane system, an integrated network of search radar, track radar, ballistic computer, inertial navigation, and Doppler ground mapping, then wrapped the minimum airframe around it. The side-by-side seating everyone mocked existed for one reason: the bombardier navigator needed to see the pilot's instruments during an attack run without turning his head 90 degrees. Function dictated form. The airframe looked exactly as ugly as it needed to. Pentagon evaluators in 1958 flagged 2 concerns immediately. First, Diane's complexity. The system contained more than 16,000 individual electronic components. Mean time between failures, on paper, looked catastrophic. Second, the aircraft's top speed, barely 600 knots clean, subsonic in every configuration. In an era hypnotized by Mach 2 interceptors, a subsonic attack jet felt like a step backward. The Naval Air Systems Command Review Board used the word unacceptable to describe the projected maintenance burden. Their word. Grumman's chief engineer, Larry Mead, countered with an argument nobody expected. He didn't promise to make Diane more reliable. He promised to make it modular, pull a failed black box, slide in a replacement, fly the next sortie. Maintenance hours per flight hour would run high. Availability rate would stay high anyway. The math worked on paper. Whether it worked on a carrier deck in the Tonkin Gulf remained an open question for another 6 years. The skeptics focused on speed and reliability, but neither issue nearly killed the program. The real vulnerability was how the jet delivered its bombs. And that part of the story involves a technique so precise it scared the crews who flew it. No pilot in the United States Navy had ever been asked to trust a machine this completely. The Diane system didn't assist the crew. It replaced their eyes. The attack sequence worked like this. The Intruder's AN/APQ-92 search radar painted the ground ahead in a cone 35 degrees wide, feeding returns to the AN/ASQ-61 ballistic computer. The Bombardier Navigator, the BN, sitting to the pilot's right, matched radar returns against a predetermined target offset point, usually a bridge abutment or a river bend with a distinctive radar signature. Once he locked the offset, Diane calculated wind drift, airspeed, altitude, dive angle, and ballistic arc simultaneously, then generated steering commands that appeared on the pilot's vertical display indicator as a simple set of crosshairs. The pilot flew the crosshairs. The computer released the bombs. The crew never saw the target. They never saw the ground. On a monsoon night over Thanh Hoa province, they often never saw anything at all beyond the green glow of their instrument panel, reflected in rain streaming across the windscreen. The inertial navigation platform, a Litton AN/ASN-31, held position accuracy to roughly 1 nautical mile per hour of flight, which sounds crude until you realize it fed continuous corrections into the ballistic solution right up to the moment of release. Doppler radar measured ground speed independent of wind. The search radar measured slant range to the offset point. 3 independent systems cross-checked each other dozens of times per second, and the computer reconciled the disagreements faster than any human could blink. Lieutenant Commander Lyle Bull, a BN with VA-75 during the 1967 monsoon deployment aboard USS Kitty Hawk, described a strike against a rail siding near Vin in total darkness and heavy rain. The pilot couldn't see the wingtips, Bull recalled in a post-cruise debrief. I had the offset locked at 14 miles. The computer flew us down to release altitude, 400 feet indicated, and I watched the steering commands walk the crosshairs onto the target. Bombs came off. We pulled up into nothing. Black above, black below. The ship told us later, the recce bird confirmed the siding cut in 2 places, 400 feet above the ground, in rain, at night, with no visual references whatsoever. The smell inside the cockpit runs like that. Sweat, rubber from oxygen masks, the faint ozone tang of overheated avionics, the staleness of recirculated cockpit air, became something crews remembered decades later. The vibration of the Pratt & Whitney J52 engines at military power transmitted through the ejection seat rails into the spine. A low hum that meant the airplane still flew because the instruments alone couldn't always convince the inner ear. If Diane had failed on a run like Bull's, the crew had roughly 2 seconds to recognize the malfunction and execute a blind pull-up before hitting a karst ridge they couldn't see. The ejection seats worked. The math on reaction time didn't. Every other tactical aircraft in the Navy's inventory required some form of visual acquisition before weapons release. The F-4 needed a target in sight or a radar lock on a moving object. The A-4 Skyhawk needed a dive angle and a visual pipper, and the A-7 Corsair II, which arrived later, carried a rudimentary computer, but still depended on pilot eyes for terminal accuracy. The Intruder alone closed its eyes and trusted the black boxes. Grumman's 16,000 components, the ones the Pentagon called unacceptable, turned out to be the only path to a 40-foot CEP in 00 conditions. The ugly tadpole didn't just bomb in weather that grounded everything else. It bombed accurately, a distinction that mattered to the men on the ship, counting who came back and who didn't. How many sorties did the rest of Carrier Air Wing 15 fly during the October 1967 monsoon? The Air Wing's own records answer that. 41 strike sorties across all other squadrons for the entire month. VA-75's A-6 Intruder detachment flew 68. The North Vietnamese General Staff had built their logistics calendar around the weather. Monsoon meant sanctuary. Truck convoys rolled south on Route 1 in broad columns, headlights on, drivers smoking. Repair crews rebuilt bridges in daylight. Ammunition stockpiles sat uncamouflaged at rail junctions because no American aircraft could find them through 8,000 feet of solid overcast and tropical rain. Hanoi's logisticians treated October through March the way a boxer treats the bell, a guaranteed rest between rounds. That assumption held for 2 years. Then, VA-75 launched a pair of intruders against the Haiduang Bridge complex on the night of October 30th, ceiling 200 feet, visibility a quarter mile, and the assumption died. The bridge dropped into the river. Reconnaissance photography 3 days later, the first clear morning, confirmed 2 spans down. North Vietnamese anti-aircraft doctrine adapted fast. Barrage fire replaced aimed fire. Gunners who couldn't see the intruder simply filled altitude blocks with steel, hosing 37mm and 57mm rounds into the dark at preset elevations. The tactic worked often enough. VA-75 lost Lieutenant Commander Bob Mandeville and Lieutenant Cal Swanson on a night run against a supply depot near Pu Li in November. Their aircraft took a 57mm round through the left-wing route at 350 feet. No ejection. The wreckage scattered across rice paddies that Mandeville's wingmen couldn't see. The squadron kept flying. Pause on that. Mandeville and Swanson vanished into blackness on a Tuesday. The next intruder launched Wednesday night against a different target on the same road. Commander Hunter's post-deployment report noted the sortie rate never dropped below 3 missions per night during the heaviest losses. The BNs knew the system worked, Hunter wrote. They knew the odds. They also knew nobody else could do it. If VA-75 stood down, the trucks rolled free until spring. The crews understood that math better than anyone in Washington did. By December 1967, 7th Fleet Intelligence estimated that A-6 monsoon strikes had destroyed or damaged 42 bridges, 14 ammunition storage areas, and an uncounted number of trucks along routes 1, 1A, and 15. The strike camera footage, when it existed at all, showed nothing but rain and muzzle flashes. Most bomb damage assessment came from signals intercepts, frantic North Vietnamese radio traffic, requesting emergency bridge repair crews, rerouting convoys, reporting supply shortages at forward depots that had been full a week earlier. The cost ran to 5 intruders and 8 aircrew in that single monsoon season from Kitty Hawk alone. 3 crews recovered. 2 did not. The men who flew those missions never called themselves heroes. Hunter's report called them weights on the scale, men who tipped a logistics war, one bombed bridge at a time, in weather that should have kept them home. Captain Robert Stumpf banked his intruder hard left over the Persian Gulf at 02:15 on January 17, 1991, heading for a power distribution complex south of Basra. 23 years after Mandeville and Swanson died in the rain over Pu Lai, the A-6 still flew the first night missions, still carried the heaviest loads, and still went alone. Between those wars, the intruder did everything the Navy asked and several things it didn't. It laid mines in Haiphong Harbor during linebacker operations in 1972, the only carrier aircraft with the payload capacity and navigation precision to seed a harbor at night without hitting the city. It carried nuclear weapons on Cold War alert tours, sitting cocked on carrier decks in the Norwegian Sea through the 1980s, aimed at Soviet naval bases on the Kola Peninsula. The Marines flew their own variant, the A-6 Tram, with a chin turret carrying a forward-looking infrared sensor and laser designator that finally gave the crew something to look at besides radar returns. Congress funded replacement studies on 3 separate occasions, and each time the replacement died in committee or on the drawing board. The A-6F, an upgraded model with new engines and General Electric AN/APQ-148 radar, got canceled in 1988. The A-12 Avenger stealth bomber, the aircraft explicitly designed to replace the intruder, consumed nearly $5 billion before Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney killed it in January 1991. No one could tell me how much the program would cost, when it would be available, or how well it would work, Cheney said at the cancellation press conference. The intruder, the subsonic tadpole from 1957, outlived its own replacement by default. Over Iraq, A-6Es from VA-35 aboard USS Saratoga hit hardened aircraft shelters, command bunkers, and bridges in the opening 72 hours. The tram sensor let crews drop laser-guided bombs with single-digit CEP accuracy. One crew from VA-75, the same squadron that bled over Route 1 a generation earlier, struck an Iraqi early warning radar site 40 minutes into the war. The after-action summary noted the target destroyed with 2 GBU-12s, time on station under 90 seconds. Iraqi air defenses around Basra fired everything available during those first nights. SA-6 batteries, SA-8 mobile launchers, optically aimed ZSU, 23-4 guns hosing tracers into the dark. The barrage fire looked different from Vietnam, denser, more coordinated, but the principle held. If the gunners couldn't track the aircraft, they filled the sky and hoped. One intruder took a hit. Lieutenant Commander Barry Cook and Lieutenant Patrick Connor, VA-35, went down on January 18th during a strike against Al Qut airfield. They ejected and became prisoners. Iraqi interrogators asked Cook what aircraft he flew. He told them. Sources conflict on whether his captors recognized the name. The Navy retired the A-6 on February 28, 1997. The last squadron, VA-75, the Sunday Punchers, Mandeville's Squadron, Bull's Squadron, the unit that flew 68 monsoon sorties when everyone else flew 41, made the final flight. Total intruder losses across all conflicts came to 84 aircraft. 68 of those fell over Vietnam. The airframe served 34 years, delivered ordnance in 4 combat theaters, and never once exceeded the speed of sound. The decommissioning report for VA-75, filed at Naval Air Station Oceana on the last day of February, listed the squadron's final operational status as combat ready,